Welcome to Community Focus. Hi, I'm Rick Papp. On January 1st, California became, in effect, a sanctuary state for undocumented immigrants, primarily because of two new state laws, Assembly Bill 450 and Senate Bill 54, which strongly restricted when employers or state and local law enforcement could provide information or assistance to federal immigration officials. On March 19th, the City Council of Little Los Alamitos made nationwide headlines by voting to opt out of the state's sanctuary state policy. Tonight, the man who proposed that ordinance, Councilmember Warren Kusumoto, will answer questions from local reporters about why he proposed the law and what practical effect it actually has. So right now, let's meet our reporters. In the front, I'd like to welcome Ted Apodaca, editor with the News Enterprise, and John Underwood, our local award-winning producer right here at LATV3, and of course Shelley Henderson, editor, publisher of the Orange County Breeze, a local online news publication. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Before we get started with any questions, I've got to introduce Councilman Kusumoto. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and thank you all for being here. I think you have some questions of me and why I wanted to do this and kind of the timeline. So this started for me back in the fall, November, when I saw it going through the legislature, and I thought, no, this can't happen. And lo and behold, it gets passed, and I thought this is just totally unfair. And then I think what really set me off on this is that in late last year, and then in January, I was talking with Mayor Troy Edgar and saying, we ought to do something because this law is unfair, and it's unfair to employers, it's unfair to the police in our city, and it's unfair to our constituents. So I got his support. I drafted up some talking points for city staff to look at, and I wanted to get it on the February agenda, and it wasn't ready for actually to go on the agenda, so it got pulled back, and I wanted a little bit more time to work it, so I really wanted it for February, and just timing the way it worked out, we had it in the March meeting, and all the other stuff was going on at the federal level with Jeff Sessions suing the state, so it was just unfortunate timing from my perspective, because I wanted to get this in there and deliberated by the council. So, and it really comes down to the Constitution. We have two governing documents that seem to be in conflict with each other, and I want to make sure that our city, our constituents, the employers in our city know how we stand on the Constitution and with respect to federal law, and that's what was the genesis for me proposing the ordinance that I did.
We're going to, in a second here, show a roll-in, and I'd like to, when we see the roll-in, then tell us how that impacted you,
okay,
and then we're going to get on with some questions. So we're going to watch this roll-in right now.
And so what we're trying to just make sure is that employers are aware that this is 2018. There is a new law in place, and it's important that employers in California understand what these new laws are, because ignorance of the law does not let you escape punishment. If there are violators of California law out there, law enforcement will investigate, and prosecuting authorities, could be the local prosecuting authorities, or it could be the Attorney General's office, will prosecute those who violate the law.
What I saw there on when I heard this, and I think I heard on the radio. I'm driving home, and I'm thinking how incredibly crazy and how incredibly unfair this is to employers. Now, like my employer, we have to have E-Verify and U.S. citizenship required. So we do work with the federal government. So I thought, again, if my employer has to answer a call to the federal government for any kind of inspection, and they cooperate, is my employer breaking the California, not in compliance with the California Values Act? The same thing here in the city, right? We have some employers that I believe deal with the federal government, Alliance Space Systems, Arrowhead Products, NovaWorks, and anybody else who might deal with the federal government. What are they supposed to do? So my idea is let's put a law in place that says, an ordinance that says that we comply with the federal government and the Constitution, any federal laws applicable to the compliance with immigration, and the simple ordinance the way it was written. So that was the kind of the real, I'll say, the trigger that pushed me, that says we really need to get this on our agenda.
Let's start the question with Ted.
Yeah, Warren, I guess my first question is,
Did you anticipate the kind of response this action you guys took?
No, I did not. I was just overwhelmed. I mean, you know, when we had the council meeting, it was amazing how many people from both sides of the issue came, and they're fighting this gigantic battle. And really, to me, it's a local issue for us. And you know, we got the big forces of the ideologies, and that was a surprise. I did not anticipate that. And I really, I felt for our staff and for the police, and I went and thanked each one personally and that I could find, and apologized, saying I didn't want to bring this on our city, but again, I felt so strongly that we had to do what we enacted, that I'm a believer in what we did. I just didn't anticipate the consequences of that.
I guess what I was also curious about, I mean, it seems that things are so heated in the country on these two sides, and in this issue in particular, based on the federal level and the executive branch. Why did you feel like that you still needed to take this action and sort of put Los Alamitos in this position of having to defend all of these, your positions that you guys had in the city?
So, so I think it kind of goes back to where we're a charter city. We have certain powers that that I wanted to test, right? Maybe that's not the best word, but if the state of California can make the argument that there are laws at the federal level that the state doesn't have to comply with, I want to take the very same argument and say, hey, to my colleagues, let's use the same argument, the same logic, and say we don't want to comply with that law. And so that's kind of where I was coming from on this. And I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's what I felt.
Yeah, I think that kind of answers the question.
Mayor Pro Tem, I do have a number of questions that I'd like to present to you in this hour. But the conundrum for me is where to begin.
Okay.
You begin with the constitutionality of the ordinance that you're proposing to pass versus the unconstitutionality of the prevailing SB 54, the California Values Act that is currently law in the state of California. I wonder what your thinking process, and beyond your thinking process on that, was. Were you able to, did you have an opportunity, did you make the effort to seek out legal advice on this matter before you moved to this position?
No, I did not, and there's some reasons for that as well, right? Because if I were to engage with the city attorney for legal advice, there would be cost involved. And I, as a one of five, I'm really not am able to do that. Direct staff to expend money in that way. We would need to bring it to the council, agendize it, direct the city attorney for that. So no, I did not. So John, I'm an engineer. I can look at requirements documents. Shelley can resonate with this. And I looked at what we're supposed to comply with. We take this oath of office. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but all the electeds take the same oath of office. And it's interesting, it's in our California Constitution that said, or the law that says this is the oath of office. And when I think about that and this conflict that says, if you comply with the federal, I'll say a summons of some type to come in and inspect for whatever reason, does that put us at odds with the California Values Act and the other laws that were enacted in the same vein? And just simply put, very, very simply put, if two governing documents are conflicting, one has to have precedence over the other. And what I put to my colleagues is, let's pick one that has precedence, order of precedence, and let's say it's going to be the Constitution of the United States. And not to try and go in there and surgically remove those parts of the laws that got enacted. I just said, let's just exempt the whole thing, because let's just put that aside, and we'll see where it goes.
If I may, you seem to be taking on the issue based on an intuitive sense of what the Constitution is about.
Okay.
I make a reference to Loyola law professor Kathleen Kim recently said with the Loyola Law School and a specialist in immigration rights, said that, well, I'll just quote what she said. The Los Alamitos Ordinance relies on the presumption that SB 54 is unconstitutional. They don't know that. That issue has not been adjudicated. One part of me thinks that it seems premature to pass an ordinance like this without seeing first how the constitutional challenge will play out in the upper courts. It doesn't make sense for Los Alamitos to come out with this ordinance. It seems like a waste of resources.
Okay.
Unquote.
Okay. And so is that a question in there that you want?
I'd like you to respond to law professor Kathleen Kim from Loyola University.
Well, last I checked, she's not elected to lead the city. So, maybe if she were elected leader and may have, constituency she wants to answer to, then we might have that discussion. So it's very interesting that, we're getting all kinds of, well, I am, right, legal advice, both pro and both con, but this is a local matter. This is for us, for our city, for our constituents. So to have these, I'll say, passionate sides on either one coming in there and making this battle royale, again, that was interesting, but I didn't want to invite that, but an unintended consequence, but it's a local matter. So, gee, thank you for telling us what's constitutional or not, but yeah, it hasn't been tested yet, and we are leaders of our community. She's not. So that would be my response. And I could be wrong, and I'll be happy to admit if I'm wrong, when I'm proven. But this is, I think, the right thing to do for us. And like I've told some other people, history will judge, and I'll subject myself to how history will look at what we did here.
John, we'll be back with you. Go ahead, Shelley. You got a question for?
At that meeting, when the item came up for the actual vote, Mayor Edgar did something extraordinary in that he did not leave it at just the ordinance which you had requested. He took a step beyond that and amended your ordinance to include involving the city in the federal lawsuit against California. Can you respond? I mean, did you have any idea that he was going to do that?
I know it had been suggested by staff that we look at an amicus brief, is what you're referring to, right in front of the court. And I certainly didn't oppose that, but I did not want to use that as a way to deflect me from doing what I wanted to do. And so I think staff wanted things to not be as I guess, so much a focus on us, but I felt this is what I did was the right thing to do for our community. The amicus brief may have been offered up as sort of a way to kind of back off a little bit, but maybe that was the desire of staff. But the outcome was that we got both, and so real interesting. But I certainly don't oppose that, and again, that kind of takes us to the outside of our domain and our constituents here, and what I think we're trying to look after and as leaders of this community.
Just one follow-up question. You stated that you were surprised by the reaction and how many people came in
Yes.
to the meeting. Now, I understand that an ordinance for a city like Los Alamitos requires 2 votes. Therefore, as one of the people who opposed the ordinance told me vehemently after the meeting, it isn't in effect yet, and I agreed with him. Do you expect to see a similar reaction when the ordinance comes up for its second vote this month?
I would imagine so, both sides. But maybe some of the steam is running out of people's sails. I don't know, but it probably will be somewhat contentious again. And I will apologize to our staff and our police officers for bringing this on us. But the thing that amazes me, this is for us. It's not for it's not for Loyola, which is up there in Playa Vista or whatever. It's not affecting them. It's not affecting whoever spoke from Long Beach, neighboring Long Beach, and even Rossmore. It doesn't affect them, it affects us. So this is the part where it's like, can't we just govern the way we want to? So, you know, it was a surprise, yes.
Jed, you're up.
I guess what I can't get my head around is going back to, like you said, this is a Los Al thing. You guys did this in what you figured was for the best interest of Los Al. But in this particular instance, and with this issue, I don't think it can be. And I think it proved that. You guys had people coming from all over the place to talk, and you saw some of the passion and the emotion that was there. I guess my question is, did you, I guess since you were the one that first proposed this, was there any thought from you that you maybe thought that this was a time to push this out and get this out in the open? Because we see other cities following now. They called you guys the tip of the sword and the start of the revolution.
So, maybe a little bit of a inside baseball kind of back scenes. I'm talking with Troy. Now, you all know Troy and I, we really had some battles that we bloodied each other up pretty good. And, I am so happy that we're working so well together on this thing. And I just said, Troy, the council is really working well. We should really make some policies that really help our people. And he agreed. And I did get his support to advance this. I gave him a very broad outline. And, he saw the draft. He saw, I think, almost the finished staff report that was put together. And pretty much the way it's there is what I wrote. And he was supportive of that, and we said, well, we'll see where we're at on that. But the part, again, for us, our oath of office, does that mean something? And it certainly means something to me. And, you heard Troy, right? You heard Mayor Edgar say in closing, right? He took the oath when he enlisted in the Navy to be on the submarine and fight for this country. And, that's, I think, why I wanted to do this. And again, let's protect us. I don't know if that really addresses what you had asked, but yeah, it certainly became bigger than what I had thought. I thought it would be just a very local issue, and who really pays attention to little Los Alamitos, right?
So, I guess I keep thinking, did Los Alamitos need to get this? Do you think Los Alamitos is going to be able to withstand whatever keeps coming back on this? And it seems to be.
When the big California bear wants to sit there and stomp on us, yeah. The reality is we can't sustain any kind of a protracted legal battle. So again, on the one hand, we can enact something like we did with the sex predators in the park. We enacted that, and we held out to the very end. And at the end, we got sued by somebody who said their rights were being violated. And there was, I guess, case law that says that we were going to lose. So we ended up having to undo that ordinance. So it's not unheard of. But again, the message to the community is we're trying. We're trying to battle against overreach by the state. The one thing that came not too long ago was, remember the sober living home that wanted to go in the Highlands, and the outrage there. I tried like crazy to figure out how can we find a loophole in the law, and I thought we might have had something, and we're going to do a workshop. But who really squashed that was staff. So I'm not, if I stuck to my convictions, we would have at least tried what we could have done on that, sober living homes, and see if there's a way we can protect our residents from the laws that get cast. And that's even a federal law that gets handed out to the state hands down to us. And so there may have been ways we could have regulated it through, I'll say, artful legislation locally, but we never got to do it. And so I said, no, I want to stick to my convictions. And there's another thing that's coming up, having to do with our firefighting services, and that's a different a thing for a different time. But staff needs to act on this stuff, because how can we be leaders if we can't get results that we want to through staff? So I went forward with that, and I don't know if that, again, it addresses where you're coming from, but that's where I certainly came from on this whole matter.
Okay.
John.
Well, of course, leadership is knowing when to charge up over the hill and when to hold back your forces.
Sure.
And wait for allies. I want to get back to something you said earlier, and something that you echoed in an article. in the News Enterprise, curiously enough, recently. You say that your concern was in protecting the people and in protecting the businesses in Los Alamitos.
Absolutely.
You know, I did a little informal survey myself this last week when I was informed that I could sit on this panel. I talked to a few businesses. Now, I didn't talk to aerospace companies.
Oh, okay.
Or I talked to some of my favorite hangouts, and our local American Legion Post and some restaurants in town. I couldn't find anybody that thought that this was good for business.
Okay.
Now, so my question to you is, what vetting did you do prior to this in your thinking process and your analyzing that this was a constitutional crisis that needed to be addressed? Who did you go to in the community to get support from the people, as you say, that you're representing in this matter, and the businesses?
Okay, so to answer it, really probably virtually nobody in terms of vetting. I, again, was thinking about the whole matter, doing my research as best I can, applying my life experiences to how I believe our community reacts, and then that's in some ways that's what we're elected to do. And ultimately, if I'm wrong, again, I'll be happy to admit that and take my lumps at that time. But again, there was no should I do this, should I not? And I think you can understand why, John, on that, right? Because being elected, we have the Brown Act certainly that we have to comply with,
right.
And having met resistance from our own staff, I don't want this getting out there to say, hey, Kusumoto's doing this or he's doing that. We should figure out a way to head that off. So I wasn't going to tip any hands that way either. So I did not do, is it good for Hoff's Hut? Is it good for Catella Deli? I did not do any of those kinds of analysis. So, I'll apologize to those business owners that if it negatively impacts them. But I'm going to tell you, I received 500 emails just on this alone, and very short ones, but overwhelmingly positive. And they're not just local. The local ones are very encouraging, but they're coming from Maryland, Florida, Wisconsin, New York, Delaware, Connecticut, Oregon. They're coming from all over, and they're saying, hooray for the Los Alamitos. If we could, we want to come and, move in your city. We want to patronize your business. So I'm seeing that as well. So maybe our business owners don't see that kind of reaction, but I think it's been pretty favorable, at least nationwide and statewide.
Warren Kusumoto, I am not on the panel, but I'm the host, and I get to ask questions.
Okay.
So I'm just going to ask you,
Sure.
right on topic. When this came out, this came out in the media, have you had any blowback at all from Jerry Brown's office? I mean, have you heard from the top of the state of California about it?
I have not heard from anybody.
Okay.
No.
Okay. It's just been, all right.
Yeah, it's been rather quiet from them. So I think it's a very interesting situation for them, because the argument that the California state is making would be the very same argument that I would make. So
Yeah.
let's see what happens.
Okay. Let's get to Ted. You got another question, Ted, for Warren?
Yeah, so I guess I'm understanding your concern in protecting Los Al businesses is that if they are in compliance with the California law, they are in violation of
Possibly, right.
the federal
Yeah.
U.S. Constitution. On that, now, if they comply with federal law, aren't they sort of in violation of the California Values Act now?
I would think
aren't
so.
they just breaking a different law if they're not or if they are
True.
assisting?
And this is going to be hypothetical, right?
Yeah.
Until it gets proven, until it actually happens. But true, if let's say that a company that deals with the federal government sells parts to the Department of Defense, and they get audited and they have to prove that all their employees are legally entitled to work here through E-Verify, and they provide all the paperwork. Did they just violate California's SB 54 or the other laws? And again, they probably did. So what are they supposed to do? Saying, well, sorry, government, we're not going to be able, U.S. government, we're not going to be able to take your contracts because we cannot comply with your requirements that you impose on us, because we have the state that says that the Attorney General will prosecute me and throw me in jail the minute I answer your whatever summons.
So, uh, why did there seem to be the sense of urgency to pass this now, to put this on? I mean, why not wait a little while and see how it plays out between?
Because I wanted to do it. I wanted to do it right after it became part of the law. So again, why wait? Right? I mean, the time was now. I mean, we didn't get elected to sit up there and wait for things, right?
Okay, John, Underwood.
Okay, I want to follow this.
Okay, John, question for?
Thank you, Rick. Warren, I want to continue a little bit longer on this constitutional issue. I really want to understand your process for the conclusion you came to. And I want to use an example and a question about that to you. The President of the United States, you may know, now has his own gun legislation proposal trying to move through Congress. Essentially, that legislation is called the Concealed Carry Reciprocity legislation. If passed, would essentially allow for the open carry and concealed carry to be transferred from state to state. Okay. That is to say, if Arizona, which is a fairly liberal gun-toting state, you acquired a concealed weapon certification in the state of Arizona, under the president's presumed gun control law, you'd be able to take that concealed carry bubble, if you will, that constitutional right, and be able to move from state to state with that. So wherever you went, that state's law concerning gun carry or the restrictions of gun carry would be abrogated essentially to accommodate this new federal umbrella law that allowed for concealed carry and for you to move from state to state. So suppose people came into California, a highly regulated gun control state, and one which has been shown to have been very effective in reducing gun violence in California. Suppose somebody from Arizona wanted to come into California with this constitutional bubble around him. He would be able to carry his concealed weapon anywhere in California. I'm interested in knowing how in your constitutional process, how you would view that challenge to the state of California and its threat to the public in California.
So you're trying to say this is maybe an analogous kind of a situation in the hypothetical, right? Well, maybe not hypothetical if it gets legislated, right? So
it's a constitutional point, and you've established one side of that constitutional point, the sovereignty of federal government over the state.
Okay.
So how would you view that, which is a very real possibility?
So maybe the answer, and it kind of depends on what side, I think, what side of this whole gun control argument one lies on, right? So let's go to the Second Amendment, very basic, right? The right to, bear arms. And again, I'm not a constitutional scholar, as pointed out by a member of the community, where none of us are, but certainly things are, to me, we can make things, at least, well, no, I can look at things simply, but you're asking a question that's really, really difficult to answer, because I have no answer for your question in terms of that. So how do I feel now? Is California then going to enact a law, maybe in the same kind of vein, saying, despite what may happen at Congress, in the House of Representatives, in the Senate, and signed by the President, that becomes a federal law, despite what happens, that we still want to keep out reciprocal concealed carry? That may be a similar kind of situation. Mm-hmm. And so I would think that, to me, that would be wrong, because now we've got, a state, whether it's our state or pick another state, Illinois, right? Chicago has extreme gun control. So maybe Illinois wants to do something like that. That'll be, again, that won't be the thing that triggers me, that says, hey, I need to go stick up for concealed carry permit holders, and they should have the constitutional U.S. federal right to carry anywhere they want because it passes. I'm not going to that one, it's not the one that really triggers me. So, you know, if you're looking for a reaction, I don't know how to answer it. It's a very complex issue.
But it's very simple in the sense that it goes directly to your point, which is that the federal government supersedes the state in all cases
Okay.
of sovereignty.
Okay.
And yet, just as you are attempting to protect, as you say, the people of Los Alamitos, the leaders in the state of California are attempting to protect the citizenry of the state of California.
Okay. So are you saying better gun control protects people? Is that kind of the argument then that you're advancing?
Well, in California, that's been shown.
No, but I'm asking you.
But
John,
that's not really the issue. The issue I'm trying to extract from you and your thinking process is in a case where a direct threat to the state of California and its ability to protect its citizenry by highly regulated gun control, as it has,
But that's so the argument
is threatened now by Arizona, perhaps.
But here's the thing. So the perspective of John Underwood says that better gun control protects people, the public, right? That's kind of what you're saying. Am I correct?
Well, based on the studies I've seen.
Okay, but that's what you're saying, right? So if you're asking me, do I subscribe to that? And there has been other instances where someone who lawfully has a gun that uses it to defend themselves are able to do so far before any kind of law enforcement response happens. So there's that side of the argument as well. So by heavily regulating guns, and we can look at Chicago, right? Does that heavily regulated environment, is that safer for the people that don't have guns? So it depends on what side of the argument you want to come at.
No, the issue is not gun safety here. The issue
Okay.
is, does that individual living in Arizona enjoying this new federal proposed law to be able to carry his gun right to any state in the union?
Okay.
Does he have a right to come across the state line?
I would think yes. The answer is yes.
And impose his gun rights on a state that is highly regulated and has a history of high gun regulation.
Following the trajectory you lined out, if Congress and the Senate passes this, right, enacts it, and then the president signs it, and it's law, then they have that right. I would say that they have that right. Now, if you're trying to say now, we as Californians are unsafe because somebody from Arizona is coming over here with a concealed carry weapon that they're entitled to have, if that's kind of the theory, I'm not going to subscribe to that. You know, people are trained, you know, presumably trained, go through some kind of certification process in order to have that permit. So if that's where you're coming from. So I'm not sure that, I don't see the analogy in this, and really we're kind of going down to a gun control argument, Second Amendment argument. And I'm not ready to argue on that.
I'm not even arguing Second Amendment gun control. I'm arguing the constitutionality of imposing a right, federally sanctioned right, to one person in one state and being able to carry that right to another state that might have different points of view in protecting its citizenry.
Okay.
That's the issue.
Okay.
It's a constitutional issue.
Okay.
To your point.
All right. So
does that concealed carry person in Arizona, does his right, his federal right now, vis-a-vis this new law, if it's passed, have a right to impose that on the people of the state of California?
I would say yes.
I see.
Very good. I can already see a Community Focus 2 show coming up, but we'll talk about that another time. I'm going to get right to you, but our executive producer, Larry Strother, reached out to the public about tonight's program, so they could write in some questions themselves. And if you'll allow me, I'll start with this one. This is from Barbara Farrell, lives north of the Joint Forces Base. Did FAIR, the group FAIR, or one of its subgroups contact you directly to start the motion? Has any outside group offered to pay for that brief? Is it legal to accept outside funds? Okay, so I think I answered that question before, but it all came through my study and analysis and just trying to understand what we're allowed to do, our ability as a charter city to enact ordinances that are for our people. So I did not have any outside help. There is no outside legal. And then to answer that, are we allowed to take outside legal help? I think that might be having to do with the Fair Political Practices Act and our Form 700s, if we're getting something from that, and then the
behested gifts as well. So I'm pretty good about, I want to stay away from that kind of stuff because I don't want to fill out the paperwork, to be honest. So,
Okay.
yeah, but no outside help or influence from anybody.
Okay, you answered. Shelley, question?
I have a question about consequences, perhaps,
Okay.
of your effort. In 2014, you faced no opposition in running for re-election.
Okay.
You, Troy Edgar, and Shelley Hasselbrink were appointed to fill the available seats.
Mm-hmm.
This year, Troy Edgar is termed out. He cannot run for re-election. So that brings up the question, after you get through all of this, are you going to stand for re-election? That would be your third term, and then you would be termed out.
Oh gosh, I've been asked that many times if I'm going to rerun, and I'm going to be honest. I'm leaning about not rerunning. I think I've served my my community. I've sacrificed. My family has been very, very supportive, and I think my wife would still want me to run, but I need to let other people step up and do that. We had an opening with Josh Wilson having to take a job out of state. We had some really good candidates that came forward, and they all promised they're going to run. So I think we're going to get a very good crop of candidates here, and I'm not sure I'm going to be one of them. So right now, probably not. But I did hold out the fact that when I first ran, I was pretty mad about what was going on, and if I get mad again, maybe I'll run just so I can get out there and make a difference, at least the way I want to. But right now, probably not.
The immigration laws, the immigration courts, and all those things, they don't fall under the judicial branch. They fall under the executive branch. So this is all President Trump and Jeff Sessions. And I think one of the reasons that there's so much backlash from people who don't support them is because they don't trust them to run immigration policies with any sort of, I guess, fairness or compassion or open-mindedness. At least that's my perception of it. And then the people that do support them think they want the hardline stance that apparently. Do you trust President Donald Trump and Jeff Sessions?
I don't trust anybody up there in the state or the feds. I don't trust any of them. So if that's what you're asking, but I think what's really, really unfortunate about the whole thing, and the public speakers that came to our meeting, the public speakers that go to the other councils here. There's a narrative that people buy into, and it has to do with the word immigration and the accusations that were made, I'm anti-immigrant. And the answer is absolutely not. I'm not anti-immigrant. So the thing where, and I'm going to kind of cast a broad aspersion on all of you media types, you're conflating something here that says, what is SB 54 all about? It's not to protect immigrants, it's to protect illegal immigrants. I mean, is that kind of a fair statement? And I think that when the people come up and they say, well, you're making immigrants feel unsafe, I'm thinking there's why would that be? I mean, they went through the citizenship class, presumably, right? The ones that have been naturalized. They probably know more about the Constitution than a lot of us do from, I took it in, 8th grade, my 8th grade class, and then high school, civics, we have that. And then how many of our kids know the Constitution? Our high school kids know as much as more than, or as much as the recent immigrants that have gone through the naturalization process. So we're not, the whole issue is not about immigrants that are here legally. And again, for us, for our community, how many illegal immigrants are we really impacted by? Probably not a whole lot, right? Again, it comes down to overreach by the government, the bully tactic that says, hey Warren, hey Troy, hey Shelley, hey Richard, hey Mark. You all took an oath of office, but you can ignore it because we have this law in place. That's what it really comes down to. So yeah, immigration is a really hot button. I understand that. It's a very complex issue that's been going on for a long time. And we're not going to solve it, and I'm not going to pretend to try and solve it here, but all we can do is, again, look out for our constituents. But to your point about someone who's been here 20 years, 25 years and contributing to society, certainly that I feel for those people, and those are difficult situations there. But if you recall in our meeting, there was one woman from El Salvador who came there, and she was very much in favor of what we're doing. So she's a naturalized citizen, came from El Salvador, and she's saying, she's being hurt by the people that are here without documentation. So what do you say to her you know, and you heard her, right? She's unable to find steady work because she'll be underbid by somebody who is here in the shadows. So yeah, how do we get people out of the shadows? That's again a bigger problem than what we can solve here in our city. But you know, it's well, let me say, maybe a way to do it would be with respect to my two sons, right? We raise them up to be law-abiding. And you know, again, if they, you know, somehow broke the law, there's consequences. Certainly, you know, if they broke rules of the house, there were consequences. So, you know, people take chances. There are risks. You know, life's kind of a risk trade-off. Am I willing to take this risk to get that kind of benefit? So, someone took a risk. You know, as cold as this may sound, I can't help them there, right? I mean, if it were, say, a good friend, a good acquaintance, maybe I'll help them to try and get naturalized if it goes through the process, or someone really, you know, near and dear to me. But again, people make choices, and you know, there's going to be consequences of the choices they make, much as like consequences of the choices I make, right? I'm going to face those consequences.
Yeah,
Okay.
John Underwood, question.
Well, let me pick up on something that was raised here. Warren, you said that SB 54 is about illegal immigration. But in fact, isn't it about something even broader than that? Isn't it about families in California and the rending apart of families who have existed generation after generation here? We have children here that are legal citizens either by birth or by adoption, and parents who perhaps are illegal. But did you take into consideration 10,000 families a year are rended apart by immigration deportation process?
In Los Alamitos?
In California.
Okay.
In California.
So the answer to your question, you know, that's a California state issue. And then I'll go back to, you know, broad brushing you all with the media. That's, there's nothing to say, and again, this is going to sound cold and hard, and I don't, you know, again, I feel for these people, but I want to keep my family intact. So where I ever go, I want to keep my family. But of course, they're grown now. They want to have anything to do with me. But you know, I'm just saying, they can pick up and move their entire family to where they came from or wherever they get deported to. There's nothing that says that you can't go with your children. So when media does that, they're saying you're separating families. There's a choice there that's also being made. Yeah, my child has been in the elementary school. They've got friends. They moved to high school. Military families do that all the time. They don't leave their kids behind when they go on a next assignment. They move with them. So that one is, you know, yeah, it breaks my heart, but they're, again, choices that we all can make.
Well, there are, you mentioned in Los Alamitos, not the state. No, there are not 10,000 families rented apart in Los Alamitos.
Okay.
But Los Alamitos is a very old and very multicultural community.
Okay.
And I'm
kind of proof of that.
Tell you from experience and knowledge that there are many, many families here who have been affected in Los Alamitos by the aggressive immigration tactics of ICE. And that is what SB 54 is trying to curtail.
Okay, so maybe the unintended consequence of isolating local law enforcement then puts it all into the purview of ICE to have to go and do these drastic, encroach in and extract out. Whereas if there's cooperation with the local law enforcement that says, oh, this is a good family. Yeah, we think this person may be undocumented. We're not going to turn them over to ICE because they're not really doing any harm. So you got that other side of the coin by having this law in place. So yeah, maybe it's an unintended consequence of the law that families are getting rendered apart because they don't have the ability to coordinate and extract only those worst offenders. So I don't know if that's what really kind of the question you're asking. And then families in Los Alamitos, is ICE coming in and looking for certain individuals, or are they doing some kind of dragnet or a sweep? I haven't heard of that. We get reports every week from the city manager, but have you heard of that?
It's certainly historical. There's a number of restaurants in Los Alamitos that have been hit.
Okay.
Over the, I don't want to go mention names at this point, but I can certainly produce that information. There are a number of restaurants in particular.
Was it in the last couple of years or in prior administrations?
Sure, in the last few years, yeah.
Okay, and then
so
I guess
it touches us directly.
Yeah, but again, so how are they employed these restaurants, and what's the obligation of the employer, right, for that? Again, I'm not trying to impugn anybody, but we have to kind of look at our own principles too.
Well. I guess to put it in the form of a question, SB 54, you must have at least looked closely at SB 54.
I read through it,
And
yes.
do you realize that there are many exemptions to SB 54 where violent criminals, serious crimes that are perpetrated, and other types of acts of antisocial behavior are exempted from SB 54, and where there is cooperation between the state under SB 54 and ICE?
I started looking at SB 54, but of course it was going through different amendments, right?
Yeah.
Right, as it was going through the both houses. So I just skipped that after I kind of started looking at it, and I didn't want to look at each revision or amendment that came up. So I went right to the law as it's cast into our state, and I looked at that. So when you mentioned 800 exemptions or whatever, I think you'd previously mentioned there were 60 initially, and then they went to 800 or so. Honestly, John, I didn't see those in the law. They may be there by, implicitly there, but I read through it, and so I didn't. It didn't dawn on me that okay, well, let's go ahead and enact this because, or not do this because these exemptions are there. I didn't look at it in that perspective. It really comes down to we have two governing documents that conflict with each other. Put it to my council, my colleagues. Let's pick one and ignore this law as it got cast. So I did not look at that thoroughly in terms of analysis. So I'll go back and look and see what those 800 exemptions are. But do you know how they listed them? Is it?
Well, they were enough for Charlie Beck,
Okay.
the chief of police of the city of Los Angeles, to
Which
buy
is
into
already
SB 54.
it's already a sanctuary city too, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So okay, is that in their sanctuary city policy as well for the city of Los Angeles?
Los Angeles doesn't have a sanctuary city policy.
Okay, I thought they did.
Sanctuary city is a misnomer.
Okay.
And it doesn't apply to SB 54.
Okay.
I'm going to ask another public question, and then you're up. This is from Vicki Kuhn in Rossmore. In 1942, Executive Order 9066, signed by President Roosevelt in 1942, authorized the removal of Japanese Americans and Japanese into internment camps. Authorities, military, and local police assisted in the removal. And is that what you want our police to do by opting out?
No, absolutely not. I think that was certainly a wrong act to incarcerate Americans, both born and naturalized, take away their rights. It was wrong. It was absolutely wrong. So I don't support that at all. And a while ago, when there was talk about after 9/11 about rounding up, people of a certain religion, that got me going. I would be out there. There's a mosque just down the street on Ball. If they started coming down that, I'd be out there in the front line defending them because that is just so wrong.
Right.
So,
okay, Shelley, question.
I have this. What do you say to those who say you shouldn't drag the city of Los Alamitos and its residents into your personal disagreement with the Attorney General of the state of California?
I said, well, okay, maybe, and I don't want to sound kind of flippant or snotty about it, but I think a president once said elections have consequences. So I know we were appointed, you pointed that out, but I was elected at one time to be, a leader in this community. My sense was, in talking with the colleagues, this is what was right for our city. So again, history will judge whether this was the right move or not, but if we're not here to lead, what are we here for? Just to manage? And if that's all we are, and Sacramento's going to really come and dictate everything we do, then you really don't need us. And we just need a city manager to kind of keep the status quo. So we're here to lead.
And a follow-up, if you touched on this earlier regarding the limits to what Los Alamitos could do. Mm-hmm. If California Attorney General Javier Becerra follows through on his threat to sue Los Alamitos, how will the city pay its legal bills? I had heard through the grapevine, vile rumor, people told me that the city attorney had been asked whether a GoFundMe page could be set up.
So there is one set up. So Mayor Edgar had set one up. He talked with me about it. Initially, I was not in favor of it, but he had vetted it out through the attorney, and I said, fine, go do it. So There is a GoFundMe, Los Alamitos page set up to help defray any legal costs that we might have. But based on the response that I received, and Mayor Edgar received 10 times the response, there are people around the country that want to give money to us to help fight this. So if the Attorney General comes in and sues us, I just can't imagine the response that will happen that in terms of funding rolling in. But again, we can only hold that so long, and we'll see where we go. But at least, from my standpoint, we're trying to lead, and we'll go from there.
So it would be the Los Alamitos 12,000 against the California 40 million.
David and Goliath.
Okay, actually we're winding down, but Ted, we're going to go ahead with you. We're going to get everybody another question in. Go ahead, Ted. Hold that. Yeah.
Thank you. Actually, I guess my next question kind of falls on it. Wouldn't be the Los Alamitos 12,000 because the city's pretty strongly divided now. You had people out here just last week that were still protesting that we're Los Alamitos.
On the order of 20, I heard. Is that
something like that?
Yeah, okay.
20 maybe. So, but I guess the point is that we have a divided country now with all one side and this ordinance, this thing that the city council passed, seems to have put a bit of a divide within the city, specifically the 12,000 here. I don't know what the percentage breakdown is or who are in support, who are against. How much does that bother you that this has sort of created that rift?
Well, I guess I don't know that I would necessarily say there's that rift that we saw at the council, that a rift with the residents. I was asked that question by someone from NPR just yesterday. So it's really interesting. So besides the email I have received, just walking our dogs around the neighborhood, neighbors will stop and pretty much give a positive comment saying it was a good thing we did this, and they're in favor of that. Now, I don't fool myself. There are neighbors that I know that are not in favor of that, but the passions I think that you saw that night aren't. I think that's not Los Al that I know, but at least in the neighborhoods that I'm familiar with. Maybe some of the other ones, there may be some more of the passions flaring up, but I don't necessarily see it dividing us, but I know that, again, there'll be consequences, and we'll see where those are in terms of future elections or even future meetings or effectiveness. But yeah, we're a divided nation. There's no doubt about that. But Los Al is Los Al, and we're a community, and I still get that sense of community. So,
okay, John, question?
Have you studied sufficiently the impact, the financial impact that could fall on the city of Los Alamitos and its residents as a result of being the point of this spear politically?
So the impact meaning state funds that may go away, is that kind of the impact you're referring to, or
all the
or customers fleeing businesses from here? Is that kind of the impact?
All of the above, including not excluding the possibility of lawsuit, as that ACLU representative said to us at the last meeting.
But okay, so but here, on the subject of lawsuit, and I know it's a little bit of a tangent kind of an answer, but how extraordinary it is to sue us for enacting something and putting it on paper. So words on paper, we're going to get sued until something happens in the hypothetical, right? Someone cooperates with the feds, there's no crime. There's no violation of SB 54, even though we may say in our city you're protected from SB 54. I don't fool myself from from 1 minute that says that's going to protect an employer here from, if they cooperate, that they're going to be prosecuted. I don't fool myself. We're doing what we can, but we're going to get sued for having words on paper, and that's kind of, then there's an expense. So Mayor Edgar has been very proactive and foresightful, saying there's a GoFundMe page set up to help offset those costs. When we had to fight the sexual predators in the park ban that we enacted, that we had to hold out to the very end, that ran us on the order, if I recall, $30,000 to enact and back it out. So we're talking on the order of that in terms of expense.
But right now I got to thank our executive producer, Larry Struther, his hardworking crew, for bringing community focus to you, the people. And Warren, thank you so much. If you can face this firing squad, you can face anybody, pal.
Well, you
You're
know
gonna
what?
be easy, mate. I want you to look right in that camera and give us 60
Okay.
seconds of a closing line.
I wasn't prepared for this. So I do want to thank the folks that are here questioning me. I've mentioned it to them. I've been rather hard to get a hold of. I don't like doing this. I tend to be a very private person. I said earlier I'm an introverted nerd, and I'm proud of the nerd part. So I wanted to be fair to the folks here, because this whole issue really, again, there's a lot of calls for media for me to be in front of other cameras and microphones, and it really is unfair to our local folks here that are know the city, know the community, ask the tough questions, and I really appreciate you all being here. And I hope we can do this again. I hope you can do this with other elected and other civic leaders, and we can really bring something to the community, because I wanted to get this out there. And not have the other narratives, and this is who I am, this is what I am, and again, I'll open up to you if you have any other questions as follow up. Certainly, just call me up, ask me. I think you all have my cell phone number, and don't hesitate, and I'll try and answer those. And you can use this material any way you want. And again, like I said earlier, it's available unedited as well. I know Larry's going to edit, but I want to make sure the unedited part is available as well to anybody in the public. So with that, I want to thank you all, and thank you.
Absolutely, Warren. And we'll see you again. Thank you for tuning in to Community Focus. There will be another show. See you down the road. Thank you for tuning in.